The great hall is hushed. Sunlight pours through the high-arched windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air, transforming the mundane into the sacred. 100 faces are turned forward, fixed on the moment, ready for the ritual to begin. Every detail screams perfection, stability, and future promise. This is the apotheosis of social order, the ultimate performance of commitment. And there, standing rigidly at the focal point of all that expectation, is the groom. He is dressed impeccably, his smile fixed, his hand slightly clammy, trying desperately to reconcile the immense public joy surrounding him with the sudden, sharp, ice-cold realization that has just punched him in the gut. It is not doubt, not jitters, not the predictable cold feet cliché of sitcoms and novels. This is something else entirely. This is existential dread distilled into a single paralyzing millisecond. This is the recognition that he is not the master of his fate, but the subject of a colossal cosmic fraud. He realizes, with horrifying clarity, that he is a pawn, and the game he is about to play is rigged against him, designed not for his happiness, but for his obliteration. This is the moment of pure terror that Arthur Schopenhauer predicted for every man at the altar, the instant where the veil of delusion is ripped away, revealing the horrifying machinery of existence. We are about to descend into the most uncomfortable truths about love, commitment, and why we engage in the grand spectacle of marriage, guided by the most pessimistic and brutally honest philosopher in history. Before we fully commit to this journey of unavoidable suffering and necessary disillusionment, let us acknowledge the shared space of this universal human experience. Tell us, from what city are you bearing witness to this uncomfortable philosophical wedding? Drop your location right now as we begin to build the framework for understanding this terrifying revelation. The foundation of this terror, according to Schopenhauer, rests on his single terrifying concept, the will. Schopenhauer saw the universe not as a rational place designed by a benevolent God, but as a blind, striving, aimless force. This will is the fundamental reality, the relentless energy of becoming that underlies all phenomena, from the growth of a tree to the pounding of the human heart, and crucially, to the urge to reproduce. Everything we perceive, our bodies, our thoughts, the world around us, is merely representation, the ephemeral manifestation of this underlying, irrational will. And the great tragedy of human existence is that we are conscious, self-aware fragments of this will, cursed with the painful clarity, representation, to observe our ceaseless striving and the resulting, inescapable suffering. We strive because the will demands it, but every fulfillment of a desire only leads to temporary relief, immediately followed by the emergence of a new desire, trapping us in a cycle of longing and pain. This is the cosmic backdrop against which the groom stands. He believes he is acting freely. He believes he chose his bride out of unique personal adoration. He believes he is entering into a contract of mutual happiness. And the world, the priest, the guests, the societal narrative, they all conspire to affirm this belief. But Schopenhauer smiles grimly from the shadows, recognizing this scene as the will's most spectacular and effective deception. The terrifying realization that strikes the groom is the sudden, catastrophic awareness that his supposed individual romantic love is nothing more than the will of the species, the relentless, blind drive toward reproduction, coercing his individual will into service. Schopenhauer argues that what men call romantic love, that intoxicating, obsessive preoccupation with a specific person, is merely nature's brilliant, cruel mechanism to ensure the pairing of individuals best suited to produce the most robust possible progeny. The ecstatic feeling, the sense of destiny, the profound need for union, all of it is a chemical and psychological hallucination designed to override rational self-interest. It is the will of the species whispering in the ear of the individual, ensuring the continuation of the species, regardless of the individual's potential misery. The groom, therefore, is not choosing a partner. He is being chosen by the species. He is being shanghaied into a biological mission. Imagine the sudden, suffocating claustrophobia of this truth hitting him as the music swells. He looks at the beautiful, radiant figure walking toward him, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment he doesn't see his beloved. He sees the living embodiment of the will's inescapable trap. He sees the future years of joint financial worries, shared anxieties, the loss of autonomy, and the unavoidable commitment to raising new specimens for the will's relentless machine. He understands that this radiant moment of ultimate personal fulfillment is simultaneously the moment of his greatest personal sacrifice, his willing surrender to the primordial biological mandate. He has been tricked into thinking this is about them, when in reality, it is purely about it, the will. The terror, therefore, is the intellectual awakening, the brief moment where the suffering of consciousness pierces the anesthetic of love. The groom realizes the monumental lie, that the very emotion that brought him here, that he celebrated and chased, was not generated for his well-being, but for his enslavement. The wedding ceremony itself, with its vows and permanence, is the official stamping of the contract, the moment the escape routes are formally demolished. It is the societal ritual that confirms his new status as a sacrificial lamb for the greater, uncaring biological imperative. This is why the terror is pure and absolute. It isn't based on solvable problems. A prenuptial agreement can solve financial fears. Therapy can address communication issues. But nothing can undo the fundamental metaphysical entrapment by the will. The groom stands there immobilized because he has just discovered that the entirety of his most important life decision was orchestrated by a blind force indifferent to his personal happiness. His entire adult life, the search for the perfect partner, the planning, the expenditure of immense resources and emotional energy, all of it was merely the meticulously laid bait in a colossal cosmic trap. Schopenhauer makes it clear that the will seeks to perpetuate itself, and in doing so, condemns the resulting individuals, the children, to the same endless cycle of striving and suffering. The groom, in that terrifying moment of clarity, realizes he is not only signing away his own relative freedom, but he is also guaranteeing the perpetuation of human suffering into the next generation. He is becoming an active participant in the machine that grinds up individual happiness for the sake of biological continuity. The will has won, and his brief window of understanding is the painful price he pays for his elevated consciousness. Think of the dense weight of the commitment. Marriage, particularly in Schopenhauer's era, was not easily dissolved. The legal and social chains forged in that moment are meant to be unbreakable, precisely because the will needs certainty for its reproductive project. The groom has just agreed to a lifetime of shared existence, where the potential for conflict, disappointment, and inevitable suffering is magnified exponentially by the forced proximity and mutual reliance. The brief honeymoon of illusory happiness will fade, leaving behind the hard reality of two individual wills constantly bumping and grating against one another, all while serving the larger, crushing will of the species. The terror is the realization that he is willingly walking into a prison cell designed for two, and the key is being thrown away not by his partner, but by his own biological nature. The performance must continue. The pressure to smile, to appear ecstatic, to fulfill the script of the happy groom is overwhelming. This necessity to perform happiness further fuels the terror. He cannot scream, cannot flee, cannot even twitch, because the entire apparatus of civilization, custom, and expectation is holding him fast. Any deviation from the script would not only shatter the day, but expose the raw, ugly truth of his existential crisis to the assembled audience. And this is precisely what the will works so hard to conceal. The spectacle is necessary because it drowns out the philosophical truth with overwhelming aesthetic and social noise. The true horror is that this realization is completely incommunicable. He cannot turn to his best man and say, "My dear friend, I have just realized that I am nothing more than a temporary vessel for a blind, inexorable force bent on self-perpetuation through my imminent procreation. And the concept of love is a neurological trick designed to facilitate this tragedy." He can only nod, straighten his tie, and force the smile that signals his surrender. This terrifying moment is often fleeting. The will, being the relentless master, swiftly pulls the veil back over the groom's eyes. The sight of the bride, the familiarity of the ritual, the sheer momentum of the event, reassert the intoxicating delusion. The critical moment of philosophical clarity, the glimpse behind the curtain passes and he reverts to the role of the happy, willing participant. But the scar remains. He now carries deep within his subconscious the truth that his life, his love, and his future were predetermined by a force he can neither negotiate with nor escape. And here lies the profound difference between cold feet and Schopenhauerian terror. Cold feet are anxiety about the outcome of the relationship. Will we be happy? Can I afford this? Terror, in this context, is anxiety about the nature of reality itself. Why am I doing this? Why are we forced into this cycle of striving? The latter is far more devastating because it undermines the very foundation of meaning and purpose the groom thought he possessed. He is not just giving up his weekend freedom, he is giving up his illusion of free will. He is acknowledging, perhaps for the only time in his life with such intensity, that he is fundamentally a creature of desire, driven by instinct, and that his highest emotional aspiration, romantic love, is merely the refined tool of the cruelest biological necessity. He has attained the highest joy of human companionship, only to simultaneously realize that the mechanism that delivered that joy is his doom. This recognition, this terrifying crystalline moment of self-knowledge at the altar, is the zenith of Schopenhauerian suffering. The philosopher tells us that existence is painful striving, and marriage is the will's most effective means of ensuring that the striving, and therefore the suffering, never ends. The groom is signing up for the ultimate existential endurance test, and he understands deep in the pit of his stomach that there is no finish line, only the gradual, inevitable decay of the individual will until the will of the species has utilized him completely. He has become a generator of future struggle, a link in the endless chain of human disappointment. This is the beginning of understanding the profound, uncomfortable truth that defines the married state for Schopenhauer. It is a slow, agonizing process of disillusionment, punctuated by this initial moment of pure, blinding terror at the very gateway to his new life. And the ceremony continues, indifferent to the metaphysical crisis occurring within the impeccably dressed figure waiting patiently for his fate. The music swells again, the performance resumes, and the will reasserts its tyrannical control, smothering the faint, tragic cry of the individual soul. The weight of this philosophical perspective is immense, demanding that we rethink the very concepts we hold dearest: love, choice, and commitment. This initial revelation about the will and the true nature of romantic love only opens the door to the deeper, more painful layers of Schopenhauer's analysis. We have only just established the cosmic scale of this terror. If this foundation of the will and the species' grand deception has landed hard on your understanding of human nature, capture that feeling in a single, powerful phrase. Write this specific phrase in the comments right now. The veil dropped. Use those 3 words to signal that you understand the depth of this realization and that you are ready for the next level of this terrifying truth. We are navigating truths that most people spend their lives avoiding. To continue this journey, you must affirm your commitment to genuine, uncomfortable depth. Hit that subscribe button immediately. Join the community dedicated to grappling with the hardest questions of existence, those who refuse to settle for surface-level explanations. Do not let these insights fade into the noise of the internet. Secure your access to the subsequent parts of this profound discussion by hitting the like button, showing the algorithm that this difficult wisdom matters. In the next part of this analysis, we move beyond the will's trap and delve into the immediate aftermath. We will explore exactly what Schopenhauer proposes as the only viable escape route from this cosmic enslavement, detailing the radical, counterintuitive actions the groom must take to reclaim his autonomy, and why those solutions are often more painful than the suffering they aim to cure. Prepare yourself for the ultimate revelation on freedom and resignation. You will discover the only way to genuinely defeat the will. We all know the sacred image, the altar drenched in light, the ethereal white dress, the swelling music promising eternal bliss. But look closer, beyond the staged joy, focusing intensely on the man standing rigid at the center of this spectacle, the groom. Just before he utters the single binding phrase that seals his individual fate, there is a flicker in his eyes, a momentary involuntary widening that registers a profound, chilling recognition. This is not the familiar flutter of pre-wedding nerves. This is not mere fear of commitment. This, according to Arthur Schopenhauer, is the purest form of existential dread, the instantaneous recognition that the entire glorious narrative of his life, his free will, his romantic choice, his pursuit of personal happiness, has been hijacked. It is the instant the rational man realizes he is nothing more than a tool, a puppet, and the master pulling the strings is not a benevolent God, not destiny, and certainly not his own calculated choice, but the blind, relentless, and utterly indifferent cosmic engine known as the will. This glimpse behind the gilded veil of romantic illusion is the one moment of pure, undiluted terror every groom experiences, whether he has the philosophical vocabulary to articulate it or not. Before we delve deeper into the metaphysical chains Schopenhauer claims are now locking the groom into place, acknowledge the scope of this universal reality. Tell me, where in the world are you witnessing this inevitable truth unfold? Drop the name of your city right now. The terror at the altar is the ego's violent final stand against the overwhelming tide of the species' will. For months, perhaps years, the groom has lived inside a carefully constructed narrative of autonomy. He believes he met his partner through happenstance, fell in love based on shared interests, and proposed because their personalities harmonized perfectly. Schopenhauer dismisses this entire psychological tapestry as the most sophisticated deception in all of nature. The intense, dizzying, overwhelming state we label romantic love is, in Schopenhauer's dark analysis, merely the chemical bait, the potent hallucinogen manufactured by the species' will to ensure the optimal pairing for future generations. The individual, the intellectual man, thinks he is choosing happiness. The will knows it is choosing genetics. The specific agonizing terror arises when the intellect, the small, weak candle flame of human reason, suddenly cuts through the drug-induced haze of romantic passion and sees the truth of the transaction. The groom momentarily recognizes that the woman standing opposite him is not merely the object of his desire, but the necessary component for a genetic synthesis required by the blind compulsion of existence itself. His personal preferences, his career ambitions, his cherished freedom, all become instantly secondary, subservient to the biological imperative of perpetuating the line. The will operates with ruthless efficiency, and its method for ensuring this terror is so specific because the individual selection process is not random. It is clinically precise. Schopenhauer posits that when a man feels that overwhelming, non-negotiable pull toward a specific woman, it is not because she aligns with his conscious ideals, but because she genetically compensates for his own deficiencies. If the man is physically weak, the will drives him toward a woman of powerful physique to strengthen the offspring. If he is short, he is irresistibly drawn to a tall partner. If his lineage is prone to poor health, the will manufactures intense desire for a partner of robust constitution. The intellect believes it loves the curve of her smile. The will cares only for the shape of her pelvis and the quality of her DNA. The terror, therefore, is rooted in the realization that his deepest, most personal feeling, the very foundation of his being at that moment, was not personal at all. It was merely a tool used by a higher, indifferent force. He sees himself, for one lucid, horrifying second, as an agent of propagation, an essential cog in the machine of biological continuation, stripped of his cherished individuality. He has been strategically selected and guided toward this very spot on the altar, having mistaken the leash of the will for the wings of Eros. This metaphysical shock is instantly devastating because it implies the loss of control, not just over his future, but over his past. The entire courtship, which he fondly remembered as a series of free, deliberate choices, the first date, the declarations of love, the proposal, was nothing more than the will executing its meticulous strategy. The groom's autonomy was an illusion, maintained solely until this moment of final binding commitment. The wedding ceremony is not merely a social contract, it is the ritualistic public surrender of the ego to the species, the formal declaration that the individual life will henceforth be marshaled toward the utilitarian goals of genetic survival. Consider the physical reality of the wedding vows. The groom stands there witnessing the culmination of the will's masterpiece of manipulation. He is about to swear lifelong fealty to a commitment that is profoundly unnatural to the individual ego, which seeks freedom, novelty, and the cessation of suffering through aesthetic detachment. Instead, he commits himself to responsibility, routine, and suffering, the necessary conditions for successful child-rearing. Schopenhauer views marriage not as the beautiful union of two souls, but as the calculated partnership for the production of the next generation of will slaves. It is a necessary evil, a pragmatic arrangement for the species, but a tragedy for the individuals involved. The moment of terror is the sudden, catastrophic realization of the difference between the reason he believes he is marrying and the actual reason he is marrying. His conscious reason, companionship, love, mutual support. The will's reason, optimal genetic contribution to the human lineage. The terrifying clarity is that these two reasons are mutually exclusive and violently opposed. The will's primary concern vanishes the moment the genetic outcome is secured, namely when the children are born or the partners are locked into permanent mutual dependence. This explains for Schopenhauer the deep and widespread domestic misery that follows the romantic intoxication. Once the will has achieved its objective, it pulls the plug on the delusion. The beautiful, intoxicating illusion fades, leaving the two partners to face each other without the species' necessary chemical distortion, often discovering that their deeply felt soulmate connection was simply a hormonal mandate. The groom at the altar sees the future unfolding not as a blissful journey of shared interests, but as a metaphysical treadmill. He sees the slow erosion of his intellectual pursuits, the necessary compromises of his character, and the perpetual labor required to maintain the apparatus of continuation. His life, which was once a pursuit of knowledge or art or personal ambition, is instantly recategorized as a resource allocation problem, dictated entirely by the needs of the child who does not yet exist. This is the existential shudder, the recognition that his consciousness, his intellect, and his entire existence have been instrumentalized. Schopenhauer's philosophy insists that the highest purpose of the intellect is to gain sufficient clarity to deny the will. The aesthetic contemplation of art, the pursuit of objective knowledge, or the rigorous practice of asceticism are the only methods for temporarily or permanently escaping the will's tyranny. The wedding ceremony, conversely, is the ultimate public surrender of these very possibilities. By saying "I do," the groom actively chooses to re-enroll in the cycle of suffering and desire, tethered to the will until death. The depth of the groom's terror is proportional to his prior intellectual capacity. The more he prized his freedom, his philosophical detachment, and his rational control, the more brutal is the sudden realization of his total lack of agency. He feels the metallic snap of the metaphysical chain closing around him. He understands instantly and irrevocably that his love story was less a tale of two kindred spirits and more a biological supply chain narrative. He is the delivery mechanism for a new generation, and his personal happiness is irrelevant to the overall success of the operation. The language of the wedding ceremony itself reinforces this terror. It is archaic, ritualistic, and emphasizes duties, obligations, and permanence, all concepts designed to suppress the individual's natural inclination toward change and freedom. The groom is forced into a performance of eternal devotion, knowing, perhaps subconsciously, that the emotion fueling this devotion is chemically manufactured and will inevitably decay once its biological purpose is fulfilled. He is witnessing the tragicomic paradox of human existence. The most profound personal choice turns out to be the least personal. The most free act becomes the most constrained. This terrifying lucidity lasts only a fraction of a second. The pressure of the moment, the gaze of the congregation, the expectant smile of the bride, the commanding voice of the officiant, immediately forces the intellect back into subservience. The will reasserts its chemical control, pumping a fresh dose of illusionary fervor into the groom's system, masking the dread with a rush of manufactured joy and commitment. He blinks. The moment passes, and he says the word. But the memory of that stark, cold truth remains, buried deep, ready to resurface months or years later, when the romantic glow has dimmed and the hard work of the utilitarian marriage begins. The terror at the altar is merely the opening scene of Schopenhauer's domestic tragedy. This tragic surrender to the will is unique among human actions because it is celebrated as the pinnacle of human achievement. Society congratulates the groom on his maturity, his stability, and his commitment, entirely oblivious to the fact that they are celebrating his voluntary enslavement to the relentless, purposeless engine of existence. The applause, the toasts, the gifts, all serve to drown out the echoes of the intellect's desperate, dying cry for freedom. The groom, now husband, steps away from the altar forever changed. He is a man who has looked into the abyss and recognized the mechanism of his own existence. He realizes that the passion he felt for his bride, which he believed to be transcendent and unique, was merely a generalized biological drive personalized for a specific genetic objective. He is now bound by the fundamental philosophical mistake of confusing the will's dictates with personal destiny. This metaphysical hangover is the true foundation of marital struggle, a struggle not against the partner, but against the crushing awareness that the romantic relationship, once viewed as an end in itself, was merely a means to the will's end. The terror at the altar guarantees a life dedicated to function over fulfillment, a life spent servicing the demand for continuance, rather than pursuing the pure, unattainable quietude sought by Schopenhauer's true philosopher. The marriage is now an engine of necessity, and the husband is chained to the boiler room. We have just explored the terrifying moment of realization, the flash of clarity seconds before the word, "I do." It's the instant the species will asserts its absolute dominance over the individual. We must capture that recognition, that metaphysical shudder, in a single potent phrase. Type this phrase into the comments right now. The chains are visible. This seals our connection to this dark, undeniable truth about human compulsion. You recognize the profound value in these unflinching analyses that strip away comfortable illusions. Show that appreciation. Hit the like button immediately. Subscribe to this channel, securing your place among those who dare to look behind the curtain of reality, those who understand the true forces governing our decisions. You deserve consistent access to the deepest truths. The journey into the depths of Schopenhauer's despair is not yet complete. We must now confront the final, crushing stage of this tragedy, the slow, inevitable disillusionment of the marriage itself. Next, we analyze the philosophical post-mortem of the will's victory, and the subsequent fate of the two individuals left to navigate a world where the intoxicating illusion has completely dissolved. Prepare yourself for the brutal reality of the aftermath, the cold realization of why happiness was never the objective. Do not miss what comes next. A quiet moment, a flash of absolute clarity, strikes the groom like a metaphysical bolt of lightning. This is the zenith of Schopenhauer's terrifying insight, the definitive climax of the great biological conspiracy. The terror that seizes him is not the fear of commitment, or of financial ruin, or even of disappointing his new family. That terror is superficial. The real terror, the cold dread that steals the air from his lungs as he stands before the altar, is the terror of having his illusion of personal agency ripped away, just for a second. He sees with devastating clarity that he has been played. He was convinced he was choosing a partner out of rational love, out of aesthetic preference, out of a deeply personal, sovereign desire for union. But in this singular, agonizing moment of truth, his intellect, his fleeting capacity for rational thought, screams the realization, "I am a puppet." He realizes that the entire intoxicating saga of romance, the overwhelming tidal wave of desire, the obsession, the singular focus on this one specific individual out of 7 billion people, was nothing more than the beautifully elaborate bait set by the will. It was the genius of the species taking control of the rudder, hijacking the ship of his life and steering it, not toward his personal happiness, but toward the sterile, unyielding objective of creating the next generation. This isn't a marriage between two souls. It is a compulsory contract signed under duress, with the will as the relentless creditor, demanding payment in the currency of future existence. And if this sudden clarity, this moment of existential dread, has ever crossed your mind even momentarily during a significant life decision, then you already know the crushing weight of Schopenhauer's truth. Before we dive into the final definitive conclusion of this terrifying transaction, tell me right now, where are you witnessing this inevitable philosophical confrontation? What city are you watching from? The groom, suspended in that terrifying silence, understands the horrific implication of Schopenhauer's doctrine. He is sacrificing his individual peace for the continuation of the species' inherent suffering. His terror is the natural, appropriate response of the individual will, the ego, as it is forcibly subjugated by the universal will, the biological imperative. The ego desires tranquility, comfort, and the cessation of desire. The universal will demands action, struggle, and the perpetual cycle of generation and decay. The wedding is the symbolic slaughterhouse where the former is sacrificed to the latter. Schopenhauer teaches us that love is merely the most cunning trick the will employs. It promises eternal bliss, unique connection, and absolute fulfillment, but delivers only temporary satiation followed by the inevitable return to desire, friction, and the duties of existence. The specific traits that led the groom to fixate on this one woman, the curve of her smile, the sound of her voice, the alignment of her genetics with his own to produce the most robust possible offspring, were genetically coded signals, irresistible biological commands disguised as irresistible personal preference. When the panic hits him, it is the brief, desperate attempt of his own rational consciousness to reclaim control from the biological automatism. It is a terrifying realization that his deepest, most defining emotional experience was not his at all. It belonged to the species. The clashing friction of two lives forced into permanent, intimate proximity is, in Schopenhauer's view, the inevitable result once the will's glamour fades. The moment the primary objective, the securing of a breeding partner, is achieved, the blinding light of infatuation begins to dim. What is left is not the idealization, but the raw, unvarnished friction of two separate, self-interested individual wills constantly grinding against each other. The bride's quirks, which once seemed charming and unique, become irritating habits. The groom's preferences, once viewed as endearingly masculine, become rigid, selfish demands. Schopenhauer views this marital reality as the necessary foundation of misery upon which the next generation is raised. The dissatisfaction, the occasional resentment, the dull weight of obligation, these are the necessary prices paid for the continuance of life. His moment of terror at the altar is the fleeting prognosis of this lifelong diagnosis. He is seeing his future of required compromise, of shared financial worry, of the slow, inevitable extinguishing of his individual passions in favor of familial responsibility. He sees the slow erosion of his freedom, all in service of a will that is blind, indifferent, and fundamentally malignant. This profound philosophical terror, the dread of becoming a functional, reproductive unit rather than a free, thinking individual, is what Schopenhauer defines as the true human condition. And the tragedy, the final devastating conclusion, is that the groom must suppress this terrifying truth almost instantly. He cannot bolt. He cannot scream. Society, the will's most powerful collaborator, demands that he smiles, that he declares his consent with conviction, that he assumes the mask of joyous enthusiasm. The terror must be swallowed, because the societal contract is stronger than the individual's existential truth. The collective hallucination of romantic love is too powerful to be shattered by one man's philosophical crisis. He must push the panic down, back into the subconscious depths where the will resides, and resume the performance. The very act of saying, "I do," is not an affirmation of personal desire. It is the ultimate act of submission to the will. It is the moment he resigns himself to his fate as a biological vessel, acknowledging, if only subconsciously, that his highest purpose is no longer self-actualization, but the maintenance of the great, ceaseless cosmic engine. The kiss that follows that public, celebrated moment of union is the sealing of the pact. It marks the complete surrender of the intellect back into the illusion. The terror recedes, replaced perhaps by a temporary flood of relief, the short-lived peace that follows the cessation of intense internal conflict. He is safe again, tucked back into the warm, comforting lie of human purpose. But the knowledge, the cold, sharp truth of that moment, remains buried. It becomes a ghost in the machine of the marriage, ready to resurface during the inevitable moments of friction, duty, and shared suffering. The subsequent reality of marriage, as Schopenhauer outlines, is merely the mechanism of disillusionment. Happiness, the promised prize of romantic love, is consistently proven to be illusory, merely the brief interval between the frustration of one desire and the emergence of the next. The will demands struggle, because struggle is life. If the couple were perpetually happy, the urgency to act, to change, and crucially to create would diminish. The will uses the subtle, persistent friction of marital life, the small disappointments, the minor resentments, the clash of established habits, to keep the engine running, to ensure that life remains a burden that must be continuously surmounted, thereby guaranteeing that the cycle of desire is perpetually renewed and redirected, often towards the next grand objective, the welfare of the children. The children, the ostensible fruits of this love, are in Schopenhauer's analysis, the ultimate proof that the entire enterprise was not about the parents' happiness. The arrival of offspring shifts the focus entirely. The individual wills of the parents are further diminished, now enslaved not only to each other, but to the relentless needs of these new organisms. This is the final, definitive victory of the will. The groom, who momentarily saw the terrible truth at the altar, now accepts his lifelong role as a provider and protector for beings whose very existence guarantees his continued sacrifice. He realizes that the entire beautiful spectacle, the white dress, the flowers, the vows, the emotional music, was nothing but the ornate camouflage for a cold biological calculation. The true purpose of the wedding was not joy, but necessity. The terror he felt was the last flicker of his self-aware consciousness, fighting against its own obsolescence, a desperate plea for freedom before being subsumed into the anonymity of the species. Schopenhauer's final philosophical pronouncement on the matter offers no comfort but only definition. The highest form of wisdom available to the groom is the recognition of his servitude. He is free only in the theoretical moment he realizes he is not free. The marriage, viewed through this lens, becomes a profound act of philosophical resignation. He has agreed to shoulder the burden of existence, to accept the suffering and the inevitable disappointments, not because he is stupid or weak, but because the will is omnipotent and relentless. He has traded the potential for philosophical tranquility, the Schopenhauerian escape through aesthetic contemplation or asceticism, for the raw, messy, necessary commitment to life itself. The moment of pure terror at the altar is the fleeting glimpse of the door to freedom, which he must deliberately choose to shut in order to fulfill his biological destiny. He steps forward, committed to a future of inevitable suffering, because that commitment is the price of continuing the line. That realization, swift and devastating, is why every groom has one moment of pure, blinding terror at the altar, the moment he realizes he has volunteered for eternal servitude, and that the person he loves most was merely the magnificent, beautiful instrument of his enslavement. This understanding, however devastating, is fundamentally empowering. Recognition is the first step toward genuine intellectual freedom. The terror only lasts a second because the will quickly covers its tracks, but the memory, the intellectual scar of that realization, can inform every decision that follows. It allows the groom to navigate the inevitable frictions of marriage and life, not as personal failures, but as predictable consequences of the will's inherent structure. He learns to detach his expectation of happiness from his commitment to duty, finding what peace he can in the intervals. This philosophy demands a new understanding of commitment. It's not a promise to be perpetually happy, but a grim, brave agreement to share the inevitable burdens. Schopenhauer's analysis strips away the saccharine illusion of romance and presents marriage as it is, the most vital, dangerous, and biologically necessary of all human contracts. The terror is the sign that the contract is authentic. This is the definitive conclusion, the realization that true freedom is not found in escaping the contract, but in understanding its terms. You now possess the knowledge of what truly happens beneath the silk and flowers. Now pause and absorb this truth. We have unveiled the fundamental, terrifying mechanism that underlies one of humanity's most cherished ceremonies. I know this perspective is intense, but the clarity it offers is undeniable. You have witnessed the deep philosophical reasons for that silent panic. Share your immediate takeaway, the core phrase that encapsulates this Schopenhauerian terror. Type this phrase into the comments right now. I am a biological sacrifice. You know this channel provides the depth, the philosophical weight, and the unflinching truth that others avoid. We demand more from ourselves and our minds. Lock in that commitment to intellectual growth right now. Hit that subscribe button and engage with the material. Do not let this realization simply pass you by. Join the community that pursues genuine, hard-won wisdom. We have explored the terror of commitment, but next time, we explore the terror of solitude. Prepare yourself. We will delve into the profound psychological reasons why modern life makes true independence feel like an existential threat. It is a terrifying journey into the self, and it is mandatory viewing for anyone seeking true autonomy in a world built for dependence. Do not miss it. The next video is crucial.